You're just in time. We're playing What Do You Want to Be When You Grow Up? Okay, me next. A supermodel.
I want to be 5'10" like Cindy Crawford.
Supermodels. We all know about them, and we all have different opinions.
Supermodels. Nothing super about them. Spoiled, stupid little stick figures with poofy lips who think only about themselves.
But as the fashion industry evolves, models evolve with it. Social and cultural movements greatly influence fashion and what the general public desires. But I wanted to look into the particular period of the 1990s, a very eclectic time for fashion, where the 80s was all about opulence, the 90s embraced opulence and edginess simultaneously. How come particularly in the 1990s, supermodels were all the rage? Where did this interest come from? And how and why did the supermodel label fall off? There's a small, very slight pet peeve of mine. It's not a big deal, but it still irks me. Models who appear in any sort of commercial work are referred to as supermodels, and I'm just like, no, they're not. They didn't even walk for Givenchy. The way I would personally define a supermodel is being regularly appearing in high fashion and commercial campaigns, and the general public being familiar with who they are. Disclaimer, this is not a fashion history video, but rather a look into fashion models. So the tea of whatever designers are doing would probably be a different topic for a different video. Content warning, this video has mentions of workplace harassment, eating disorders, and drug use. So now, let's get started. So modeling as a profession started in 1853, but the profession would be expanded even more so due to the rise of photography. The idea of the fashion model has always paralleled to what was going on in the fashion industry. High fashion, or haute couture, started gaining popularity in France in the 1940s and 1950s, with famous brands including Chanel and Dior. Paris claimed its name as the fashion capital of the world, and the world's most stylish city. So how did models come to play in this time? Models were primarily unknowns who were poorly paid, with a few exceptions. One exception included Lisa Faunus-Greaves, who appeared in over 200 Vogue covers. As a result, landing a Vogue cover would be an important factor to a model's success. But still, models presented an idealistic glamour fantasy of luxury clothing. In the 1960s, modeling agencies started to become established due to the rising interest in fashion. This led to models like Twiggy and Jean Shrimpton becoming some of the most notable fashion models and trendsetters of their time. Their public image would characterize the essence of swinging London and the British mod look. Models were no longer just living coat hangers. They can be representations of concepts and ideas, which would better help sell clothing. In the 1970s, with the effects of the counterculture, traditional ideas of glamour was put into question. There were models who were well-known names, but they were restricted by the industry as just being images in a magazine and not much else. But they would occasionally be signed to represent brands, CoverGirl Cosmetics being particularly notable.
11 o'clock, Gia Marie Karanji.
Gee, what?
G. I. A. There, Gia.
In 1977, Gia Karanji signed to Wilhelmina Models at age 17. She is regarded as the world's first supermodel. She stood out from her contemporaries due to her willingness to photograph nude and for how she'd play up her androgyny. In the late 70s and early 80s, she would be a favorite amongst photographers and would be on all the covers of the big-name magazines of the time. Gia had a mystique, a mystery about her, so much so that to this day, people are still fascinated by her. And this is how you make a supermodel. In the 80s, the modeling industry would be taken into its biggest height yet. By the time Reagan went into office, there was a wave of fantasy opulence and a return for old Hollywood glamour. Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous was one of the most popular shows on TV. The yuppie was the new role model of American youth. Even Barbie was getting more bougie. The public would happily become slaves to labels, so naturally this was a great time for high fashion. Big hair and heavy makeup galore. During the mid to late 80s, a crop of new models were getting discovered and were easing their way into the industry. And they would soon become not only the most famous models in the world, but some of the biggest celebrities in the world. When people thought of the word supermodel, they thought of Linda Evangelista, Christy Turlington, Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, and Claudia Schiffer. Coincidentally or not, they were all signed to elite model management. This management wanted their models to make their names as forces in the industry, which would help bring excitement and allure to luxury clothing. They would regularly be featured in shows for some of the world's biggest designers, and be seen in editorials for the biggest fashion magazines. By the year 1990, the supermodel era emerged from 3 events. One was the January 1990 British Vogue cover, where photographer Peter Lindbergh wanted to show a representation of the 90s woman, showing softer, more natural-looking makeup and clothing. The next moment was George Michael's Freedom 90 music video, where all the girls in the British Vogue cover lip-synced to the song. They were no longer just figures in the fashion world. They were now a part of pop culture. And lastly, there was the Fall-Winter 1991 Versace show, where Linda, Christy, Cindy, and Naomi walked down the runway as Freedom 90 played. The serotonin the show gives me. Linda Evangelista infamously joked in a 1990 interview, "We don't wake up for less than $10,000 a day." This quote would probably be the most famous sentence in the fashion world, and even cause a little bit of controversy, which is pretty unnecessary since she was just kidding. Relax, people. Let's not do another let them eat cake situation. I theorize that supermodels gained mainstream popularity due to perfectly crafting a mix of old Hollywood glamour and contemporary modern coolness. Claudia Schiffer helped bring Guess jeans into the map and became the new face of Chanel in 1990. Cindy Crawford would be the public face for Pepsi and Revlon Cosmetics. She was also the host for the best new show of all time, MTV's House of Style, which followed what was going on in the fashion world. Naomi Campbell was featured in MJ's music video for In the Closet. You know she was trying to do something.
I may kiss him, but I mean, if I kiss him, I'm not gonna kiss him with a screen.
And she fell in a Vivienne Westwood show. She's fallen! Naomi, alongside Linda Evangelista and Christy Turlington, were referred to in the industry as the Trinity, creating this iconic picture. There were even supermodel workout tapes because, remember, this is the 1990s. Even their workout outfits are so cute. They would even be featured in movies and TV shows, but mostly in small cameo roles. Cindy had a starring role for the very forgotten action thriller Fair Game, and was nominated for 3 Razzies. Documentaries, Models the Film, and Unzipped showcase life behind the scenes of the glitzy modeling world. And all of this was happening while they continued to be in all the runways, magazines, and fashion campaigns. These girls were killing it, and everyone had to accept that. And now is an appropriate time to showcase my personal top 10 favorite runway shows of the 1990s. In 1995, chain restaurant Fashion Cafe opened its doors, defining itself as a more couture version of Hard Rock Cafe and Planet Hollywood. This restaurant was one of those good in theory but bad in execution type of situations. There was a runway in the middle of the restaurant that models may or may not walk on, and the entire restaurant was said to have resembled a gift shop. If that's the case, I can totally see why it would be disbanded only 3 years later. This entire restaurant was sort of a flop. In the mid-90s, there was a new crop of emerging models. Charlotte Harlow, Tyra Banks, and Kate Moss were some of the most notable names to join the supermodel ranks. Not to mention that models like Yasmin Gahari, Karen Mulder, and Veronica Webb were also excelling in the industry. Shalom is known for perfecting the zigzag walk. Tyra, at age 17, booked 25 shows in her first runway season, and would mention that on every single episode of America's Next Top Model. Kate Moss would challenge runway height requirements, standing at a very short 5'7", and helped popularize the waif look in the industry. More boundaries would be pushed with the very controversial heroin chic style. The purpose of this style, at the very core of it, was to put beauty standards into question. Where supermodels would commonly be photographed looking glamorous and vibrant, the heroin chic aesthetic had models looking either tired or disinterested. I theorize that this was a byproduct of the grunge movement, and the general trend of nihilism. Kate Moss was branded as the public face of this trend. This look received lots of criticisms due to its alleged glamorization of drug use and what was deemed unhealthy-looking models. President Bill Clinton even stated that this aesthetic was destructive. But heroin chic still impacted culture for decades. 2013 Tumblr looked pretty similar to this, though it was just rebranded as indie sleaze. I was personally not a fan of that style. In 1996, there was a reported absence of supermodels on the runway. There were quite a few reasons for this. One was the overexposure of supermodels. Designers, and maybe some of the public, were getting tired of seeing the same few girls on every magazine cover and runway show. Katie Ford, CEO of Ford Modeling Agency, stated, "It became very dull, just seeing 6 people at the center of most magazines." Also, it seemed like fashion designers were getting insecure and felt as if the models were becoming the stars of the show, not the clothes. Fashion houses started designing clothes that were less flashy, so naturally, more demure, less celebrity-esque models would be more fit to represent them.
I'm not pushing personalities. And one day maybe we all will again, but right now it's not about the personalities, it's about fashion.
And I think that the biggest reason of the decline of supermodels is that the biggest girls were getting too expensive and were allegedly too difficult to work with. It seems like models have attitudes. Who knew? It seemed like working in high fashion wasn't the only requirement to have a successful modeling career. Tyra Banks altered her career from fashion brands to gaining even more notoriety from Sports Illustrated and Victoria's Secret. And maybe the career redirection was for the best since Tyra and Naomi were allegedly fighting. That whole situation is for a different video. Singers and movie stars would start replacing models for being covered on fashion magazines. And on top of that, they were getting contracts for makeup and fashion brands. This was exactly where models were making a good chunk of their money. Aaliyah representing Tommy Hilfiger was a particularly iconic 90s moment. A 1998 Time magazine article officially declared the fall of the supermodel. She's missing from most fashion magazine covers, replaced by movie starlets. She's all but gone from top advertising campaigns, beaten out by anonymous, awkward-looking teenagers. That last statement was kind of weird, like, imagine being a grown adult and low-key judging a teenager for being awkward. But despite that declaration, Kate and Naomi were still getting plenty of runway work. Given that you can't be a fashion model forever, especially considering how exhausting the industry is, the fall of the supermodel was inevitable. And it would seem that working as a model might be fun for a bit, but there are reports that the fashion industry gets old pretty fast.
Basically, in my own opinion, I wish everybody would stop dealing with this business because it's so boring.
Though the term supermodel would continue being popular amongst the general public, an era was officially over. In the 2000s, it's safe to say that the top fashion models of the period were the Victoria's Secret Angels. Their popularity would grow from their notable fashion catalogs and annual lingerie fashion shows. Interestingly, a lingerie brand would become one of the most powerful companies in the fashion world. The reason for its success is quite obvious. Tyra would expand her image into reality TV with America's Next Top Model. It's crazy that the contestants had to undergo nonsense in front of cameras, all to end up with hindered modeling careers. The industry was not kind to reality TV contestants. The show is criticized for depicting a very unrealistic view of the fashion world and for its treatment of the contestants involved. But at least we were supplied with life-changing modeling tips.
Ho, we're gonna make it fashion. Ho, make it fashion.
And currently in the 2020s, we no longer have those mythology-type stories where a girl would be discovered at, say, a mall and would then dominate the fashion industry. And if I'm gonna be real, the stories of I'm here because my family has connections just aren't nearly as exciting. But I think that the family connection models are so popular is because familiarity is a massive selling point. I mean, look at how many sequels and remakes we're getting. But though the fantasy of a model might be fun, realistically it's just not a healthy environment, especially back in the day. For one, creeps and predators could be found on every corner of the fashion world, allegedly. Full-time alleged creep, Gerald Marie, was the head of elite model management in Paris, and would use his position of power to allegedly prey on aspiring models. Sadly, I don't think he was alone in this. Ew! Coke, not the soda, was prevalent amongst other substances, and it was normal and possibly encouraged to partake in not so healthy diet habits. Hence why a lot of fashion models were smokers. And just the general requirement to fit a very specific type of beauty standard has got to take a toll on one's mental health. But the legacy of the supermodel era is still impactful to this day. The original 90s models closed the show at Versace as a tribute to Gianni Versace for the Spring/Summer 2018 show. In fact, a lot of current-day fashion shows are still referencing what happened in the 90s. They also impacted internet culture. How many times have you seen images like these all over Tumblr, Instagram, and Pinterest? The coquette girlies are all over them, alongside the Victoria's Secret girls. People are still doing hair and makeup tutorials to resemble 90s models, and a lot of everyday fashion trends are still inspired by that decade. But I have mixed feelings about the oversized blazer era. Given the current state of high fashion and social media, I find it a bit unlikely that a fashion model could rise to celebrity status without the help of a well-connected family. Of course, there are working models who entered the industry without nepotism by their side, but they don't have the mainstream popularity that Bella or Kendall has. But they deserve it because these girls are fierce. And not to mention, the fashion industry today is just not like how it used to be. But currently, with so many options for our fashions, luxury brands are becoming less of a necessity. Though social media is a controversial subject, I do think that it can be used as a space for self-expression and creativity. And if there's one thing that we can learn from supermodels, is that to always keep your head held high and work it. And don't forget to smize. But what do you guys think? Would you like to see a new crop of girls that were as big as the Big Six? Or do you think this type of celebrity is better off staying in the past? I learned a lot about the fashion industry for this video, and I can really see that the current models are really taking tips from the 90s girls. But this was a fun topic to dive into, and I hope to see you all in the next one.